Hi everyone, my name is Natalie. Today I wanted to do the first reading wrap-up of the year. So 2023 in terms of my reading has kicked off to a fantastic start. I've been really in the reading mojo lately and I feel like I keep finding books I want to read and I'm really excited about reading, and generally speaking just finding more time in my everyday to sit down with a book. So that has been really great for January, which I think this month in general, outside of reading, is quite hard for me. I think it all often feels like a uphill battle, and having reading as comfort I think has been very helpful. So today I want to talk about the first 5 books I've read in the year. So I guess I'll go with the order that I read them in. First we have Diary of a Void by Yagi, and this was translated by David Boyd and Lucy North. January is January in Japan. It's a annual thing on Instagram and it's hosted by EndNotes, I want to say. I will link the Instagram account below. This is a fairly recent release about a woman who pretends to be pregnant. So she works in an office job. She's the only woman working there, and she's pushed to do all of these menial tasks that no one wants to do at the office, but she's just expected to do them, like do the dishes, make the coffee, do various prints and things that anyone could do, but she's just expected to do them. And so she pretends to be pregnant randomly as an excuse not to have to do these things. And this book is partly about her pretense of being pregnant, and she starts to sort of keeping track of where she should be in her pregnancy in order to keep up the facade of this fraud, of this pretense. And so it's about that journey and how she is pretending, how she's kind of keeping track with everything, and the reactions of the people at the office. Of course, they don't expect her to do certain things anymore, and what does that mean in this environment? Why was she expected to do all of these things when she wasn't pregnant, and now it's suddenly accepted that anyone else could obviously fill in the tasks, do the things, and she didn't necessarily have to do them. Obviously things worked out anyway, and why hadn't they changed before she made this revelation? So it's a lot about the workplace environment, about sexism at work and the unjust expectations and sort of unwritten rules of how the environment looks and everyone's responsibilities. But it's also about her inner journey and how she kind of finds her place and figures herself out through this journey, that sort of just having this particular purpose in her life seems to guide her, how she sort of just fits into new groups, new areas of life. She tries new things because it's sort of part of her journey. It was just a really fun premise of a book, I think, and an interesting way to explore the work environment in Japan that is very easily applicable to most of the world, I would assume. So I had a lot of fun with this and would recommend if you're into this type of thing. It doesn't really have a resolution, I wouldn't say. Like, there's no big conclusions to draw from the end of this, but I enjoyed it for what it was. And I think if you're used to reading slice of life Japanese literature, then you are probably not expecting a big hurrah at the end. Like, that is not necessarily a typical thing for this genre of Japanese literature. So if you're into that style, then I would recommend this. Then I read a fantastic nonfiction book called The Draw of the Sea by Wyl Menmuir, and this is a book all about people who are drawn to the sea in various ways. So it's talking about people who are divers, people who are fishers, people who are swimming, who are working in and around the sea, who are in some way connected to it on a very meaningful way, in very strong ways. And some of them have their livelihood connected to the sea, some of them are just very passionate about it. So it's also talking about people like doing mudlarking and what is the word, beachcombing and that kind of thing. I just found this to be so fascinating. All of you know and have heard me talk about this endlessly, that I am fascinated by the sea, that I feel myself drawn to the sea very easily, and I am also very, very interested in people who are drawn to the sea. I really, really enjoyed reading this. I found certain aspects of it to be particularly enlightening. There's questions about ownership in regard to the sea in the chapter on beachcombing. That I found really fun, and I really loved the chapter on freediving. I watched some YouTube clips of the people that was referenced in this book in the freediving chapter, and I was just mesmerized and also slightly anxious for them. I just found it fascinating to see and to hear about their experience. There is a chapter on Arctic expeditions, which I also find very fascinating. So I just had so much fun with this. I think if you are someone who enjoys reading about the element of water and how it can become such a central thing to human beings in so many different ways, then I would strongly recommend putting this on your list, because I feel like it has completely gone under the radar for some reason, and I really, really enjoyed it. Then I read a book that I enjoyed, but that was kind of forgettable overall. It wasn't, it was definitely the least spectacular of the pile, and that is Gubbe and Katt by Nils. Uddenberg. I know that this has been translated into various languages. I saw that it had been translated into Italian, among other languages, so it might be available in English, I'm not entirely sure. But this is basically about a elderly man who, it's a memoir, it's about a elderly man and a woman and his wife who adopt a cat that has been sort of started to live in their, what is the word, like the garden, the garden storage house. I can't think of the word right now. And it starts living there during the winter, and they start feeding it and all of that, and eventually they allow the cat to move into their house. And it's a lot about, first of all, how the cat becomes part of their lives and how their life changes. And they were not really cat people, they were not really interested in having a pet, and so it's about that unexpected friendship that they find with this cat. And I thought it was cute, it was fun, but it didn't go beyond the very superficial levels of kinship. And many of it talks about this connection and about how they met with the cat and how the cat eventually sort of dropped their guards and became more and more central to their lives, and how they eventually couldn't imagine their lives without the cat. But I think it had a lot of sidetracks, which was just sort of like factual things about cats, and those were just a bit too too obvious, too factual, like things you could easily find if you just Googled. And I felt like there could have been more exploration of the relationship rather than having these factual bits. So I enjoyed it, but I would say that this is the kind of cutesy book that you could probably gift to someone who loves their cat, but that isn't it isn't going to change your life, like, let's put it like that. I would have wanted to have more introspection, and this is quite descriptive, I think, in the approach to this topic. So then we have two books by Jhumpa Lahiri, who I have sort of fallen in love with. I mentioned in my authors I want to read more of in 2023 video that she was one of the authors I had on that list, and I read In Other Words by her a few years ago and have wanted to read more of her works ever since. So I started with Whereabouts, which is her first book that she wrote. the first novel she wrote in Italian, and it is also the first work of hers that she translated into English herself. So this is about a woman who is moving through the city. It's a very quiet, contemplative book. So she's moving through the city, she's making observations of strangers' lives, on friends' lives. She's very indirectly part of people's lives and observing them and reflecting on her own and what she wants and how she's living, how she's quite content with her life in its quietness and in its sort of stability, that she finds a lot of safety and content through the stability of her life. The fact that it isn't changing is kind of key to her current happiness. It shifts a bit throughout the book, but I think the book itself for me was centrally about solitude and sometimes loneliness, about observing people's lives, of not really being part of them in any key ways, of finding what you want to do with your life and figuring out how to get there, like how to change things, especially if they're sort of solidified. If you've been living in a certain way for a long time, and how do you find the strength to shift things around? And I just really love this. I think the contemplativeness reminded me a lot of Deborah Levy in her autobiography trilogy, and the solitude, loneliness theme and the way of observing people in cityscapes and that kind of thing reminded me of Olivia Lang's The Lonely City. So this was just sort of a medley of things that I like, and I really liked just being in the head of this protagonist. So I'll see if I can find a few examples of the writing that I particularly liked, like this during the summer. Then at a certain point, everything grows static, choked by silence and inertia, and the very lack of activity feels paradoxically depleting. And I think this was just a type of book that I really enjoyed reading in January, where I often feel that sense of unease, and I think it's sort of connected with New Year's and the pressures, the unsaid pressures of things changing and how it can be kind of overwhelming. And so I felt like this book was just the perfect book to read during this time of year, and I think for a lot of people February is the same. So I would definitely recommend if you're if you're craving that type of book. In the pool I lose myself, my thoughts merge and flow, everything, my body, my heart, the universe, seems tolerable when I'm protected by water and nothing touches me. So she's talking about swimming, which you all know I love to read about. So I just really enjoyed this. I think Jhumpa Lahiri's writing is just... I really connect with her writing, and I was afraid that I might not enjoy her fiction as much as I enjoyed her nonfiction, but that wasn't the case at all. I really enjoyed this, and yeah, I can see myself rereading this for several sections of it. And then the other book that I think has some fingerprints, because it's that type of texture on the cover, is Translating Myself and Others, and this is an essay collection. Some of them have been translated by herself, by Jhumpa Lahiri herself. Some of them have been translated by other people or in collaboration with other people. This is published by Princeton University Press, where she works, and the essays have more of an academic tone, so have that in mind if you've read In Other Words and you're looking for more of the same. I think this has definitely more of an academic style and tone and sort of approach to things. This essay collection is talking about translation, about language, about Italian specifically, about literature and writing, so all things that I enjoy reading about. She has a really interesting perspective on this because she became a writer first in English and had been using English as her first language, has been using English as a writer for a long time, but then she decided to learn Italian, and she moved to Italy and started writing in Italian as well. And so she's talking about this bilingual nature of her as an author, and switching languages that she writes in, that she lives in. She has a lot of interesting things to say about that duality and about sort of being of different languages, being of different countries. She talks a lot about translation as a creative thing, and I think it's so important. It's such an important part of the discussion on translation. How much sort of creative choices has to be made in order to create a translation. Like, a translation will never be an easy, straightforward thing to do. And I think it can sometimes be forgotten when you are used to just reading in one language, and that is the only language that you consume things through, that translation is always a creative thing. And because, as I said, there's so many choices to be made, how to convey the meaning, how to convey the melody of writing, what things to prioritize in a translation, because usually you can't have it all, and what to do with words that isn't translatable in a way that the new language context how it will make sense in the new context, cultural context. For me, this was just sort of fueling my personal interests, and I had a lot of fun with reading this and thinking about the ideas that she presents. I think Lahiri is both a really fantastic thinker and really interesting writer, and she's also sort of humble, but at the same time she's so decisive in conveying her thoughts and opinions. So I just love the balancing of how she sort of, I don't know how to explain it, but it's like she understands that there's many ways to view the world, and how her opinion, her point of view is not necessarily the be all end all, but at the same time she's very good at argumenting for her point of view. I will say I can see that this would not be for everyone, because the essays, some of them are more general, some of them are more specific, and I think the specific ones could probably be boring if you're not really that interested in the topic. But I like to hear her thoughts on everything. So yeah, I hope some of that makes sense. I really enjoyed reading this, and I am looking forward to reading more Lahiri in the near future. I think I will prioritize the most recent books she's written, because I am particularly interested in her relationship with Italian, and whenever she thinks about this or engages with Italian, I just find that there's something magical that happens, and I don't even know how to put it, why I feel so drawn to it, but I have really enjoyed reading both her writing on Italian and her writing in Italian. So I think I will read her most recent publications next, and then go back to the things that she wrote originally in English. But yeah, so 2 Lahiri books in the beginning of January to set me off to a good start to the year. So currently I'm also reading really fantastic books, 2 of them that have been very engaging. One of them I think might be one of the books of the year already, so I'll talk more about that in the next wrap up. That's all I wanted to say today. I hope you have read something fantastic in January. Let me know if you found any new favorites, any books of these that you have read and you want to share your thoughts. Please feel free to do so in the comments. I hope you're doing well and you're taking care of yourselves, and I will talk to you soon.